Okay, we have some sad and disappointing news from the world of rugby league. Featherstone Rovers have entered administration. Yesterday, HM Revenue and Customs applied to the High Court for a winding up order, and in order to keep the club alive for now, the club have appointed administrators. They have run out of funds. They've not got enough funds to sustain the club without going into administration. This does mean some non-playing staff are going to be laid off. People are going to lose their jobs. There has been concerns around Featherstone's finances over the last few months, but with what was going on at Salford, it got ignored a lot by the rugby league media into a certain extent, and the sports media in general. But there were reports and rumours circulating that the club had been struggling at times to pay both its players and non-playing staff their wages on time. Now, last month the wages were paid in full on time. However, the club has run out of funds, and in order to keep the club as a going entity whilst they try and restructure their debts, not only with the tax office but also with their creditors, they've appointed the administrators. Now, 2023 was a big year for Featherstone. They went all in to try and get promoted to Super League before IMG came in with their grading. And the regular season, fantastic. Post-season, the post-season, they lost the games that mattered. Ultimately, the Championship Grand Final was played between Toulouse and my club, London Broncos. London Broncos win. They spent a season in Super League. And when it came to grading, they were graded bottom. And so they ultimately slipped out of Super League, played back in the Championship this past season. And of course, now we've had the Super League expansion, and Toulouse is one of those clubs with the current grading with what happened with Salford, who've gone up, including Bradford and York, to the expanded Super League. And when the RFL announced Super League was going to be expanded for next season, a lot of people felt it was being rushed, that it should have waited a year until the new TV deal was negotiated, because the current TV deal is worth half as much as the TV deal was pre-COVID. And so when you expand Super League by two sides, although three sides went up because Salford ultimately went bust, it means the TV revenue, which is not enough, has to be spread more thinly in a league system that is heavily gate receipt reliant. It is reliant on fans going to games, fans in attendance, fans buying merchandise, heavily gate driven league. And Featherstone ran out of money. Now, their situation is different to Salford. This is not like bad ownership, making, basically claiming they have money that they don't, and being basically criminal. This is just a club that overextended itself financially when they were playing really well. They built a strong squad. They had to pay for that squad. However, they've run out of money. It sometimes happens that clubs just generally run out of money. The problem is they haven't been up to date with all their taxes, so they owe outstanding tax, plus they also owe other creditors money as well, hence why the administrators have been brought in. The concern that I think many fans would have, not just Featherstone, but all rugby league fans, is the club ceases to exist, either before the regular season starts or during next season. It is not guaranteed that having the administrators brought in is a guarantee that they can find or secure further funding to keep the club afloat and to pay some of the outstanding debts that the club owes, to the tax office and also to their creditors. But it is sort of a stopgap measure for now. Similar with Sheffield Wednesday in English football. They've still got to figure out a way to pay the creditors, pay the players and the non-playing staff, and protect as many jobs as possible. However, there is the potential, and a very big potential, that Featherstone do cease to exist. The concern is that the regular season starts in about 2 months' time. We are in pre-season. Regular season games will be played in about 2 months' time. The season starts. And the concern is that, 2 weeks ago we had a 21-team championship. They merged, League One and the championship together. We might have a 19-team championship as early as next month, post-Christmas. Considering that players have obviously been signed to contracts, teams have been prepping, for the upcoming season, their home and away schedule. The schedule hasn't been fully released yet, but teams were preparing for next season, signing players, prepping and budgeting for their home games, their away games, how much revenue they were going to bring in on the gate receipts with approximate budgeting. And now one club's gone bust, one club very it's a very realistic possibility, could go bust. Other clubs are also struggling financially. But this is a recurring thing. Not only have Salford and Featherstone had their issues in the last 12 months, but we've seen before COVID, Widnes administration, Bradford Bulls, couple of administrations. Now, yes, they are back in Super League, and there are, we can debate the pros and cons of them being readmitted to Super League, but they've had their financial issues historically. Newcastle, Thunder, they've had to reform. They basically went bust and reformed. The London Scholars have dropped down to amateur status in order to keep their club going. They dropped out of League One, which was semi-professional level, in order to keep the club going. The club is still going, but has now dropped down to the amateur levels to ensure the club's survival, which is, as a London Broncos fan, look, the Scholars are a key part of rugby league in the southeast. A lot of gatekeeper fans say we don't have enough fans down here. The game isn't thriving. There are 8 amateur teams in London that play their own amateur league regionally. The problem is they can only sustain themselves at amateur status. They can't take that next step up because they just don't have the funding. And yes, the fan base is a lot smaller down here. I will admit that. But we do have fans down here of the game. I am one of them. I'm a very passionate rugby league fan. I've loved the sport since I was a young kid. I've watched pretty much every Challenge Cup final since 1993. I'm very passionate about the sport. I love the sport a lot. I played the sport at school. I've got friends who played the sport as well. I've got friends who go to Challenge Cup finals and rugby league test matches and go to Wembley when games are played there and as neutrals and just enjoy the game. The problem is we've also had the Toronto Wolfpack experiment failure. Obviously the COVID loans that were given out when the game was paused because of the community aspect of the game. Those loans have got to be paid back to the government. Very similar to rugby union. There's a lot of issues, a lot of structural problems. The RFL was signed up with IMG, the TV deal being worth less money and it's reduced in value. There's a lot of issues at stake. Now, yes, the Ashes series has brought a lot of revenue back into the game, absolutely. But the concern is that the clubs that are the pillars of the game, be it at the professional and semi-professional and even at the amateur level, are dying. Yes, Cornwall, you could argue the expansion into Cornwall should have been at Ottawa Races. Obviously, that didn't take place. They ended up in Cornwall. First couple of seasons was tough going. They had actually started to improve on the field, and then they also hit funding issues, ceased to exist. So this is a recurring theme, is funding, getting enough revenue in, making money. Most clubs are struggling to break even. Many are operating at a loss, including in Super League. We've seen some massive losses reported for rugby league standards in comparison to professional football. And the concern is that the administrators that Featherstone have appointed may not be able to secure that funding necessary in order so they can take the field in February. And we could potentially be in the same situation as we was last week with Salford going bust. And then that really does pose a lot of threat to the Championship and what it's going to look like because of this merger between League One and the Championship to this Super League, kind of as in the amount of teams playing in it. We now have the concern that we were meant to have 21, we now have 20, potentially 19. It could even the contagion could spread to other clubs because they would have budgeted to play against Salford, to play against Featherstone, and then you suddenly, one team gone out of business, another team is close to the precipice. And when you budgeted for those home and away games and those ticket sales and merchandise sales and potentially being on TV as well, potentially Challenge Cup games, and then suddenly your opponent doesn't exist anymore or is unable to take the field, that's lost revenue. It will hurt other clubs. The same was said when Bury in the Football League went out of business in 2019. The Accrington owner said that has cost them about £250,000 in lost revenue for both home and away games in the league alone, not including cup fixtures that could potentially be played. That was devastating for Accrington on their finances. And that's one club. Imagine that being replicated across what was Bury being in League One, being replicated across that league that season. That is a lot of money lost on heavily gate-reliant leagues with fans in attendance. That's the main bread and butter of making their money. The same rugby league is more gate receipt reliant than association football, and that is deeply troubling that yet another club is up against it. And I think more clubs could potentially follow in the next 12 months. I think there could be a contagion here, and it could spread. And that is deeply, deeply worrying. At a time when The NRL, for example, is in full expansion mode. In 12 months' time, Perth enters the competition, then PNG, Chiefs enter the competition, and then by the end of the decade, they're looking for that 20th team to enter the NRL and grow the game, whereas here, our game's falling apart. And yes, a lot of blame needs to be aimed at the RFL and some club chairmen who are, too self-centred and up their own arsehole to care about their rival clubs and the overall health of the game. There's too much self-interest. But there we go. That's my 2 cents. Deeply saddening, and we hope Featherstone can survive and put a team on the field to start the 2026 season. But it's touch and go at the moment whether Featherstone will get through the festive period, let alone take the field in February. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on the situation in the comment section below, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.